Have you ever felt like you're just drifting? Not quite failing, not quite thriving, just existing in a strange, quiet in-between. Your days are full, your calendar is packed, your phone constantly buzzing. But beneath all that movement, there's a stillness. A dull, gnawing hollowness that no notification, no paycheck, no compliment seems to fill. It's not depression exactly. It's not burnout either. It's more like a silent question echoing inside your chest. What am I doing with my life? And why doesn't it feel like mine? You tell yourself you're waiting for the right timing, waiting to feel ready, waiting for clarity, waiting until the risks are lower, the path clearer, the world less chaotic. But deep down, you know something's off. Because while you wait, time doesn't, and neither does life. And slowly, quietly, painfully, you're becoming a passive character in your own story. But here's the paradox no one warns you about. Every time you avoid choosing, you are still choosing. Choosing comfort over freedom, fear over responsibility, safety over aliveness. You scroll, you consume. You perform roles you didn't write. You stay in jobs you hate and relationships that numb you. Not because you don't know they wrong, but because stepping out means stepping into the unknown. And the unknown terrifies you. What if you make the wrong choice? What if you disappoint people? What if you fail? What if you don't know who you are outside the expectations built around you? So instead, you distract, you shrink, and you call it being practical, keeping the peace, or figuring it out. But what if you're not figuring anything out? What if you're just afraid to choose because choosing means owning the consequences? And owning the consequences means owning your freedom. And freedom, contrary to the fantasy, is heavy. Sartre once wrote, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." And he meant it. No essence, no fate, no divine blueprint. Just the brutal, beautiful responsibility to create yourself, moment by moment, through your choices. But that kind of freedom comes with a cost. It means you can't blame your parents forever. You can't hide behind culture. You can't pretend society forced your hand. Because once you accept that you are free, you also must accept that you are responsible, not just for what you do, but for everything you've allowed. That job you hate, that relationship you tolerate, that version of yourself you know isn't true, but keep performing anyway. You chose it, or worse, refused to choose anything better. And yet, despite the pain, despite the emptiness, you continue. Not because you're weak, but because you've been taught to fear your own power. Because choosing means risking everything, but not choosing means losing yourself. So let me ask you something. What are you really afraid of? Is it failure? Or is it the terrifying truth that your life is a mirror of your choices? And if you don't like what you see, no one else can fix it for you? Maybe you're not lost. Maybe you're just scared. Scared to become the one thing you've always avoided. Fully, unapologetically, dangerously free. So if you've ever looked in the mirror and wondered why life feels so hollow, if you've ever silenced a dream because the voice of obligation screamed louder, if you've ever kept yourself small just to make others comfortable, then this isn't just a script. It's a confrontation. Because the truth is this: your life is empty not because it lacks meaning, but because meaning demands a choice. And you've been too afraid to make one. But that fear has a root, a deeper psychological and philosophical trap. And to understand it, we need to go back to the source, back to the invisible system that taught you freedom was too dangerous to hold. You weren't born afraid to choose. You learned it. From the moment you arrived, the world began shaping you, not into who you are, but into who it needed you to be: quiet, agreeable, predictable. A child who didn't cause trouble. A student who followed the syllabus. An adult who got the job, paid the bills, smiled politely. Freedom was never encouraged. It was controlled, disguised, and regulated. You were told to be yourself, but only within approved boundaries. Color inside the lines. Think inside the system. And above all, don't question the rules. Because questioning leads to choosing. And choosing leads to power. And power, in the wrong hands or worse, in your hands, terrified them. So society gave you a script. A ready-made identity. Student, employee, partner, parent, consumer. Each role assigned with expectations and punishments for deviation. And you played along, not because it fit, but because it was safe. Because at some point, survival began to feel more important than truth. But here's the hidden problem. When you outsource your identity to others, you also outsource your freedom. You start to live reactively instead of consciously. And the longer you wait for someone else to define you, the more you forget how to define yourself. Sartre called this bad faith. It's not lying to others. It's lying to yourself. Pretending you are not free. Convincing yourself you have no choice, so you can avoid the terror of realizing you do. You think you have to stay in that job. You think you can't leave that relationship. You think you're trapped by circumstance. But Sartre would say, you're only trapped by your refusal to choose otherwise. Because the moment you choose, you must confront the consequences. The pain, the loss, the possibility of regret. And most people would rather live a lie than face that risk. So they shrink, they numb, they conform. And here's where psychology steps in. The ego, built to protect you, resists change. It clings to certainty, even if that certainty is suffering. It tells you, this is who you are. This is all you can expect. This is safer than the unknown. And your nervous system believes it. Because when you were younger, choosing the wrong thing might have meant punishment, rejection, humiliation. You learned to fear your own voice, to silence your instinct, to avoid taking up too much space. But what no one told you is that this conditioning doesn't disappear. It evolves. It becomes the adult who second-guesses every decision, the professional who overthinks every risk, the partner who sacrifices truth for approval, the person who waits and waits and waits until life quietly slips away. This is the invisible chain around your neck, the belief that your choices must be justified by others, that freedom must be earned, that you're not allowed to shape your own meaning unless someone signs off on it first. But Sartre's philosophy cuts through that illusion. There is no universal script, no objective path, no cosmic permission slip. There's only you standing at the edge of your existence and the choices you dare or refuse to make. You are condemned to be free, he said. Condemned because freedom is not light, it is heavy. It means the burden is yours, no excuses, no saviors, no one else to blame. But maybe that's not a curse. Maybe that's the key. Because if you are free to ruin your life, you are also free to rebuild it, to walk away from the roles that no longer fit, to become someone no one ever expected, including you. But before that can happen, you must stop lying to yourself. You must stop pretending you are powerless. You must confront the deeper fear that everything you called your life was just a series of safe, socially approved non-choices, and that the emptiness you feel isn't a mystery. It's a signal that your soul is starving, not for pleasure, not for applause, but for authorship, for the chance to write your own story, even if your hand shakes as you pick up the pen. But this fear doesn't just affect you. It infects society. It shapes generations. It creates entire cultures of silent, obedient people going through the motions, never asking why. It's not just personal. It's systemic. And its consequences are far more devastating than most people ever realize. You think your life is fine, maybe even good enough. You get through the week. You show up to work. You smile at the right people, say the right things, no major disasters, no public breakdowns, just a quiet, steady erosion of aliveness. But that erosion is the cost of not choosing. And it doesn't look like chaos. It looks like routine, like autopilot, like a calendar full of obligations you never questioned, like a house filled with things you never truly wanted, like a version of you that looks complete on the outside, but feels like an echo on the inside. This is how it happens. You start by avoiding one hard choice, then another, until your entire life is made of things you didn't choose, only tolerated. You become a shadow of possibility, a living museum of missed chances. And the worst part? You tell yourself this is maturity, that you're being responsible, that sacrifice is noble. But is it really sacrifice? Or is it slow motion surrender? Because when you don't choose, the world chooses for you. Algorithms decide what you see. Brands decide what you wear. Your parents' fears become your blueprint. Your culture's expectations become your prison. And you call it a normal life. But look closer. There's a fatigue behind your eyes that sleep can't cure. A restlessness in your chest you can't explain. A subtle despair woven into your smiles. That's the consequence of living without authorship, of letting your life happen to you instead of through you. And it's not just emotional, it's neurological. Your brain adapts to repetition. It carves deep grooves around familiar thoughts, even if those thoughts are toxic. I can't do this. This is just how life is. I have no choice. These aren't passing thoughts anymore. They're belief systems, neural pathways. And over time, they become who you are. Psychologists call it learned helplessness. When you've been conditioned to believe your actions don't matter, eventually, you stop acting altogether. You stop dreaming. You stop questioning. You stop becoming. And yet, you function. You go through the motions. You post highlights online. You convince yourself that everyone else must feel this way too. Because if they don't, what does that say about you? You weren't meant to be this domesticated, this numbed, this quietly obedient. There's something in you that remembers a wildness, a hunger, a spark that once burned so brightly, even your fear couldn't touch it. But now, that spark is buried beneath layers of politeness, of social scripts, of years spent pleasing, deferring, compromising. You were trained to avoid your own fire, to label it selfish, reckless, unrealistic, and so you dimmed it, until one day you forgot it was ever there. And still, the world keeps turning. Billions of people living lives they didn't choose, following inherited maps, working for borrowed dreams, making themselves small in the name of stability. This is not just a personal tragedy. It's a societal epidemic, a quiet mass exodus from authenticity, a global sleepwalk, because the fewer people who choose, the easier they are to manage, the less they question, the more they consume, and the more they fear standing alone. That's the genius of modern control. It doesn't punish you with violence. It seduces you with comfort. It keeps you entertained, distracted, just comfortable enough to forget you're not free. Aldous Huxley warned of this, that the future wouldn't be a world of pain, but a world of pleasure so numbing, we'd stop noticing our own imprisonment. And that's where you are now, scrolling through curated distractions, surrounded by information, starving for meaning, addicted to the very systems that keep you passive. But the damage runs deeper than distraction. It affects your relationships. You settle for connections that don't nourish you, because choosing better would require discomfort. You let others define your worth, because defining it yourself would require confrontation. And over time, the part of you that could choose atrophies, like a muscle you forgot to use. Until one day, you're not just avoiding freedom, you're afraid of it. And here's the darkest consequence of all. You become complicit in your own erasure. You perform your life instead of living it. You say yes when your soul screams no. You survive while slowly disappearing. But it doesn't have to end that way. There's still a way back. Still a chance to reawaken that wild, powerful part of you that remembers how to choose. But it won't come through comfort. It begins with rebellion, with risk, with a radical act of self-responsibility. Because the truth is, no one is coming to rescue you, and no one has the right to write your story unless you give them the pen. Freedom doesn't arrive politely. It doesn't knock on your door and wait to be invited in. It crashes through the ceiling when you finally stop pretending. And it begins the moment you say, "I'm done living someone else's life." But let's be clear, this isn't about quitting your job overnight or fleeing to the mountains. It's not about chaos. It's about clarity. A radical shift in the way you see everything yourself, your choices, your power. Because the rebellion doesn't start outside. It starts inside your mind. The first act of defiance is awareness. The refusal to keep sleepwalking. The courage to open your eyes and say, "This isn't who I want to be." You break free the moment you stop asking for permission. From your parents, from your partner, from society. From that internal voice that sounds so rational, but is really just fear wearing a suit. You don't need a crisis to change your life. You need honesty. The honesty to admit that comfort has become a cage. That fitting in has cost you too much. That your soul wasn't made to be managed. So you begin, small at first. You say no to what drains you. You say yes to what scares you. You make one real decision, not one based on what's expected, but on what's true. And yes, it will feel terrifying. Because the system taught you that safety is found in sameness. But the truth is, your aliveness lives in the unknown. Remember this. Every act of freedom will feel like loss before it feels like power. Because you're not just letting go of habits, you're burying identities. You're burning the mask you wore for years. People might not understand. They'll say you've changed, that you're being selfish, reckless, unrealistic. Good. That means you're touching something real. You're no longer performing, you're becoming. And becoming always disrupts the roles others expect you to play. Look back through history. Those who chose freedom over conformity were always called dangerous. Socrates, Galileo, Simone de Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre. They didn't fit, they questioned. They refused to play along. And they became lightning rods for something the world fears. A person who thinks for themselves. So what does rebellion look like for you? Maybe it's leaving a relationship built on fear, not love. Maybe it's speaking a truth that shakes the foundation of your family. Maybe it's finally making the art, starting the business, writing the words you've carried for years. Whatever it is, know this. It will feel unnatural. It will trigger guilt. It will stir grief. Because every real decision kills the illusion of the old self. But that's the cost of authorship. And the reward? You get your life back, not the one others planned for you. The one you were always meant to live. And don't wait for courage to show up before you act. It won't. Courage doesn't come before the leap. It comes in midair when you realize you didn't fall. You rose. There's something feral and sacred in this kind of freedom. It's not clean or pretty. It's raw. It breaks you open. It asks you to trade security for significance, to abandon performance for truth, to stop living as a ghost in your own story. You'll lose things, comfort, approval, control, but what you'll gain can't be bought. A voice, a vision, a pulse you can finally feel again. This is not a motivational speech. This is a confrontation. Because you already know what needs to change. You've known for a long time. You've just been waiting for the fear to go away. But it won't. You have to move anyway. You have to choose, despite the shaking hands, the racing heart, the quiet panic. Because here's the secret. Fear is not your enemy. Avoidance is. Fear is just the door. And on the other side is not death, it's life. So break the pattern. Burn the script. Reclaim the pen. No one is coming to write it for you. And when they ask, "Who do you think you are?" you'll answer not with words, but with the quiet power of someone who finally chose. Not because it was easy, but because it was yours. And that is where real meaning begins. You spend your whole life trying to be chosen. By your parents, by your teachers, by your lover, by the world. But the truth you've been avoiding is this. The person you needed to be chosen by was you. Not the version of you that performs. Not the version that pleases. Not the one who disappears to make others comfortable. But the one who remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. The ultimate freedom is not found in rebellion alone. It's found in responsibility. Not the shallow kind, built on tasks and checklists, but the sacred kind, the terrifying kind, the kind that says, "This is my life. I chose it, and if I don't like it, I will choose again." That's the final, brutal, beautiful truth. You are always choosing. Every silence, every compromise, every hour wasted in places that starve your soul. All of it choice. And when you finally stop running, stop blaming, stop waiting, you see it clearly. You are not a victim of fate. You are the author of it. Sartre called it existential responsibility. That no matter the circumstances, no matter your past, no matter what's been done to you, you are still responsible for what you become. And that realization will either destroy your illusions or liberate your soul. Because now you understand there is no external meaning waiting for you to discover. No hidden path. No divine script. Meaning isn't found. It's made. Crafted from your choices, your suffering, your courage to stand alone in the dark and say, "This matters because I say it does." It's terrifying, isn't it? To realize there's no one to tell you who to be. But it's also the greatest relief. Because if no one can define your essence, then no one can take it from you either. You're not who they said you were. You're not who you were forced to be. You're not your trauma. You're not your resume. You're not your failures. You're not your applause. You are the one who chooses again and again. In each moment, with each breath, with each terrifying leap into the unknown. And that means you can begin again, right now. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when the stars align or someone validates your path, but now. You can wake up from the script, from the trance, from the quiet resignation that's been weighing down your soul. You can say no. You can say yes. You can walk away. You can burn what was never yours to carry. You can build something truer, wilder, more you even if no one understands it yet. Because the life you want doesn't require permission, only courage. And courage, as it turns out, was always waiting beneath your fear. You may lose people. You may lose stability. You may lose the life you built on borrowed dreams. But what you'll gain is priceless. Yourself. Not the performance, not the persona, but the real, raw, untamed version of you that's been buried beneath years of polite silence. And that is the greatest risk to be seen, to be true. To choose when it would be easier to stay numb, but also the greatest reward. Because one day, far from now, when the noise quiets and the crowd fades, you'll look at your life and know it was yours. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And you will have become not what the world expected, but what your soul always knew you could be. So stop waiting. Choose, even if your voice shakes. Even if your knees tremble, even if no one claps. Choose, because in the end, the most tragic thing isn't that people die. is that most never live. Not fully, not freely, not fiercely. You have one life, one pen, one chance to write something worth reading. What will you choose?